We are live. Hi, my name is Ray Mooney. I'm the Nature Preserve Manager with the City of Port Aransas. Welcome to the Landscaping Web Series. We've been working with Kevin Gibbs from Texas A&M AgriLife Nueces County Extension Office and Sarah Cunningham from the Mission Aransas National Estuarine Research Reserve at the University of Texas Marine Science Institute on this series. We kind of came up with the idea of brainstorming for a series of speakers for landscaping professionals and groundskeepers and at-home gardeners. So as you can see here on the screen is the schedule. So it'll be the second Friday of each month through December, and with potential to extend at 2:30 on our Facebook page live. And our speaker today is Kevin Gibbs. He's going to talk to us about Waterwise strategies for healthy landscapes.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you, Sarah, for working with me. I think that's going really well, and I look forward to continue to work with you. So let's go ahead and get started. So like she said, we're focusing on Waterwise strategies for healthy landscapes today. And since we have a terrific Xeriscape garden downtown Corpus Christi, I chose to focus in on Xeriscape principles and use those Waterwise principles to help guide us today. So you'll notice the title is there's no zero in Zeroscape, because we hear a lot of people call Xeriscape Zeroscape, and it's Xeriscape, zero coming from a Greek word which means low water usage. So a good place to start is to assess what you already have in your own landscape. You know, you need to decide who's using the space, and then decide how the space is going to be used in the future. A good thing to do is decide what you want it to look like, and pick out the items in your garden that you don't like and that you'd like to get rid of. And when you're doing this, when you're planning it, you need to decide how much time you have, what are you going to be able to dedicate to maintain your landscape. We usually suggest when you're talking about Xeriscapes that you go with a smaller amount of lawn, because lawn takes up quite a bit of space, but it also is a huge water user. Lawns use more water in our landscapes than anything else. So we usually suggest that you shrink the amount of lawn space in your area. And then consider where you want to place trees, beds, and pathways, because those are important. And then you need to know, can I do this with the help? Can I get help with your project? If it's something that you're having to do by yourself, then you may want to plan it in phases and do just a little at a time. Or maybe you have a terrific large family that's able to get out there and help you get a lot accomplished all at once. Ray, can you talk about the upcoming things that we have? I have a phone call that I have to address right quick, so give me just a second. Where did Ray go? Okay, let me move on. So
I can go over the schedule if that's what you want.
That would be great, Bill, if you can do that. Do you need me to go back to that slide?
Yeah, it'd be best if you pull it up.
Okay, I'll go back to it. Give me just a second and I'll be right back.
All right, yeah, you take your phone call. So just while Kevin's on that phone call, every month we'll be having a presentation with some different topics. Last month was tree care. This month right now is with Kevin with Waterwise strategies. Next month will be with Ginger Easton with palm trees and maintenance. Then we'll have in September, actually on 9/11, another presentation going over turf graft maintenance. And all this is related to urban landscapes in the coastal bend. And then after we get through August with palm trees and September with turf grass, we'll go into October with plant diseases, and in November insects as far as problems, and then in December, insects as far as beneficial insects. All right, Kevin.
Thank you, Bill. And we have some really terrific speakers lined up. We've got Ginger Easton Smith, who is the county extension agent from Aransas County. We've got the county extension agent from Conroe, who's going to talk to you about turf grass. We've got a plant disease pathologist that's going to talk to you about plant diseases. And then we have an entomologist that's going to address insects. And then I believe that I'm back to doing beneficials if not one of the other entomologists. So thank you for, please pardon my having to stop and take that phone call. Okay, so let's talk about Xeriscape. A Xeriscape is an investment that allows you to have comfort and value in your property. Xeriscapes actually usually improve the value of the property overall. So it's a good thing that you can do and it lowers the amount of water that you have to use, but it also increases the value of your property. They can reduce the amount of water by up to 60%. Xeriscape extends the supplies the water supplies that you have in your county. Fortunately, we generally are pretty good on our water supplies. However, we do have periods where we go through drought. So having good Xeriscape management skills in place are really valuable during those drought periods. And Xeriscape's not a landscape style, it's just a conservation style that can be applied to any type of garden. So you can work Xeriscape principles into any type of garden that you choose. It doesn't just have to be cacti and succulents. And then finally, Xeriscape principles are good horticultural practices. Why would you not want to use plants in your Xeriscape that are more suited for your area and that help conserve your resources? So the basics of Xeriscape principles are simplicity. With simplicity, we choose plants that have a logical relationship to each other. So you wouldn't want to put plants that use little water in with plants that use a lot of water, because that means that the watering is not going to be the same, and it's going to be difficult to maintain both of them. You also think about scale. You want to choose plants that are the appropriate scale for the setting that you have them in. If you have a really large backyard, then of course you can use a little bit larger plants. But if you have a small backyard, then you want to go from medium to smaller plants. You need to choose some focal points in your garden. Where is it that you would like your focus to be? And that's where you probably ought to start planning and putting your design from that point out. You need to have some access points. Most yards need to have some sort of utility area, some place that you can hide stuff, so to speak. If you are a composter, you'll want a spot where you can put your compost pile, but you also need access to that compost pile where you can get to it easily. And then we have the 1/3 rule, 1/3 turf, 1/3 beds, and 1/3 permeable hardscape. So that's things such as bird baths and all those other things. So let's take a look at simplicity for a second. You want to put groups with different blooms, but similar heights and textures. So in this picture, you've got plants that are all about the similar height. You have shorter plants in the front, you have taller plants in the back. But you'll notice that there is a difference in the textures of the plants that are being used. Texture adds interest to the landscape. Again, simplicity, we have taller plants, pampas grass in the back, and then we have a few shrubs here, and then we have some smaller blooming plants in the front. Scale, you'll notice in this picture that this is a fairly large setting, and they have some large trees in the back, and then they work to the medium-sized plants in the background, and then work to the shorter things in the front, and then finally the lawn area. So made to fit. So here you have plants that have been made to fit into this area, and it seems to work okay. Here you have a nice pathway that is running through an archway. I'm curious. I love pathways that always pique your interest and curiosity and make you want to go through that archway to see where it leads to the other side. And they've done a great job here with the with the pavers and the flagstone piquing your interest. Some focal points. In this picture, you have several focal points, but the main focal point is the agave that's in the center. And then you have some sables here, and then you have some other plants that add a little bit of interest in the foreground. Size, color, and texture. So you want to work with the existing colors of your home and your landscape, and you want to try to pick out plants that are appropriate for that setting. In this situation, the plants kind of blend into the walls, so I probably would have gone with something that was a little bit different color so that it contrasted with the background. So keep that in mind. Whatever your background colors, whatever your fence colors, your house colors are, you probably don't want to pick plants that are almost that same color. Now, in this situation, they've done a great job. They picked plants that contrast very well with the background, and you get a nice visual appeal from it. So planning your landscape design. Create an overall plan including opportunities and problems so the area can be done in phases. Most people don't have the ability to complete a landscape all at one time. So we generally recommend that you put it into 4, 5, or 6 phases over several years' time. And then you put in your hardscapes first, things such as building and play areas. And then you think about your existing vegetation. Are you going to have any drainage problems? We do have some areas in around here that when we have large rainfalls events, they have drainage issues, and they have slopes that get washed out on a regular basis. Think about sunny areas and shady areas as well. And then think about your focal points where you need to place your plants. And then you need to think about maintenance. It's not probably smart to install a huge landscape if you have a small amount of time to try to maintain that landscape. And then who'll be using that space? Are you someone who likes to throw parties and gatherings, or will it just be you and your family that are using it? We also recommend that you think about some sort of rainwater harvesting. The city of Corpus Christi has a great rain barrel program, and you can purchase those rain barrels for less than $50 a piece. You can link rain barrels together. There are also custom rain harvesting systems that you can purchase online. But collecting the rainfall is a great thing. Now, we've had people say before, what use is a barrel full of water going to do me? Well, keep in mind, yes, initially it might be a barrel full of water, but that barrel is going to fill up every time it rains. It doesn't take a whole lot of rainfall for that barrel to become full again. So it's not just one rain barrel full of water, it's lots of rain barrels full of water. And then if you're stuck and you don't know what to do, always feel free to ask your local landscape experts. There are people out there that are more than happy to give you advice and help you. And you can always contact me if you're needing assistance. Here is a map of the Xeriscape Garden in downtown Corpus Christi. It's located at 1900 North Chaparral Boulevard. It's open year-round. It's actually open right now. It's next to the Museum of Science and History. It was designed by landscape architect Doug Wade. And we think that it actually does a great job of showing you that you don't have to just have cacti and succulents if you're going to do a xeriscape garden or a low water usage garden. Waterwise principles work well with lots of different plants, not just cacti and succulents. So how do you deal with slopes? This is actually a sloping area. If you notice at the back of the property, it's higher than it is at the front. So in this case, they use some junipers and a retaining wall, and it helps to hold the soil in place. So that's a great choice. You can also use ground covers in that situation. Anything that's going to provide cover for the ground and is going to help hold the soil in place when we have high rainfall events. And Corpus, although it's dry most of the year, Nueces County, although it's dry most of the year, we do go through these huge rainfall events from time to time. I think it was only last year that we had one of them where we had 7 or 8 inches of rain at a time. And the year before that, I believe we had about 14 or 15 inches of rain. So, and then that's not even considering when we have tropical storms or hurricanes that come through. So we do need to plan for controlling slope areas whenever we have high rainfall events. Here is an answer to a drainage problem. You can always make a rain garden, or you can make a dry riverbed, and when you have high rainfall events, then the water is funneled off into that dry riverbed, or it's funneled off into the rain garden. Now, what is a rain garden? A rain garden is an area where you put in plants that like water, or that at least tolerate water, and whenever you have a rainfall event, they actually appreciate the excess rainwater that's run off and do very well. In this situation, they've used quite a few rocks to make their rain garden. So if you have limited water resources, again, it's always nice to harvest the rain and the water and then create a rain garden. So in this situation, they have a way to harvest the rain, and then they have a fairly limited rain garden that's put into place. Now, pets and children. In this picture, you notice that they have cacti and succulents. They have other plants, but if you have pets and children, then you probably want to stay away from plants that are prickly. This is a purple opuntia, and you have a golden barrel cactus, and then an agave. I think that's Perry's agave. And so these might not be great choices if you have pets or small children, although it could be a learning experience. Soil preparation is important. Good soil is important because everything stems off of having good soil for your plants to take root in. Good soil makes a difference, because if the soil doesn't drain, then you're going to have issues. It promotes oxygen in the soil, and it promotes good plant growth, good root growth. It provides all the nutrients. Now, we have clay soils for the most part in the coastal bend, but those clay soils are full of nutrients. One of the things that I generally tell people if they're trying to improve their clay soil where it's a little easier to dig in it is add organic matter. Organic matter is always going to be a good component to add to the soil. And then we generally recommend that people test their soil at least every 2 to 5 years. You don't need to test it every single year, but getting a baseline of what nutrients you have is a good thing. Finding out what your pH is, what pH you have, is a good thing. You can actually just shoot me an email, and I'll provide my email address at the end, and I can send you out those forms so that you can have your soil tested from time to time. Appropriate plant selection. You should select plants that are adapted to your climate and soils. We have a terrific Xeriscape plant list, and again, you can email me. I'll be more than happy to share that plant list, or you can go to the City of Corpus Christi's Xeriscape Xeriscape page, and the plant list should be available there. You know, if you live in an area where you have a little bit higher rainfall, you should pick plants that can survive in that situation. In the coastal bend, we generally get only between 18 and 25 inches of rain, so we need to pick plants that can tolerate drier periods over time. There are some other areas where you can find plant lists as well. The Native Plant Society has a great plant list, and then you can always go to the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Research site and pick out. It has a plant selector there where you can pick out the different plants based off of the information that you put in. And then if you're looking for trees, Texas A&M Forest Service has terrific tools on their site that helps you pick out trees that are great for our area. It's important to read the plant labels and consider how large those plants are going to get. Most people have a tendency to put too many plants in too small of an area, so make sure that you understand how large they're going to get before you put them into the area. And then remember the rule, taller plants generally go to the back of the bed, and shorter plants go to the front of the bed. You don't generally want to plant things all the same height. It's better to plant things in different levels so that you get some interest in the bed. Use different colors, use different textures. Just think about your color wheel whenever you're picking out plants, and pick out harmonious colors that work together. And then think about what your landscape may look like in different seasons. Grasses have a tendency to look really great in winter. Ornamental grasses do. So I always advise people to at least incorporate some ornamental grasses into their landscape. They put out seed pods. So do shrubs. Some shrubs and some trees have some really interesting seed pods in the wintertime. So, and then plan around your sunny and your shady areas. I would advise that you go out there and get some idea of what areas stay sunny and at what time of day. So you want to have some idea throughout the day what your different areas look like. Do we have any questions at this point?
Hey, oh. Hey, Kevin, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, we do have a couple questions. We have a Port Aransas gardener on Facebook asking 2 questions.
All right.
One is, what is the best plant for the blazing sun? It's a good one.
All right.
And the other question is, will plants that grow well in Corpus do okay in Port Aransas?
Let me address the first question. So most of the time, if you are going off of plant lists that are local plant lists, or if you're going to your local nurseries, if you're picking plants that are on the tag, say full sun, you're generally going to be okay down here. Now, you have to keep in mind that the nurseries also pull in your plants that people are used to seeing, such as geraniums and petunias and things like that. So try to find local natives. Just ask them where are your natives at, and try to pick out things that are rated for full sun, and generally you'll be okay. There are some plants down here that do really well. Things that come to mind are Coreopsis, your native lantanas, Gaillardia. Those are all things that do great here. Another tip that I give people is to just wander around your neighborhood. Take a walk at the heat of the day and see what things seem to be doing really well in your neighborhood. Snap some pictures of what you like, and then head off to the nursery or head online to find where you can purchase those things. That's usually a really great way to figure out what is going to work in the heat of the summer down here in Corpus Christi. And then the second question was what?
If you're suggesting plants for Corpus, do you think that most of them would do well in Port Aransas? I know the wind with the salt and sand can sometimes
most of the time, yes,
be an issue.
Most of the time it's a yes, especially if we're looking at plants that work out on the island or in Flower Bluff, because they experience a lot of the similar situations that you do. The one thing that can sometimes be a huge factor is the wind. So you may have to scale back from some of the larger plants and focus on medium to shorter plants because of the amount of wind that you guys get. But the pH and the salt content out there really doesn't change that much from Flower Bluff and the island into Port Aransas. Now, I do know a gardener in your area that grows roses. Roses generally don't work that well out there because of the salt spray, but they're able to get up each day and wash the salt spray off, and they're successful with even roses. So a lot of it is just how much effort you're willing to put in. But yes, for the most part, the plants off of your Native Plant Society list, off of your A&M tree selector tool, and off of the Xeriscape plant list generally will work in Port A.
Cool, thank you. That's all we have from Facebook right now.
All right, we'll keep moving then. All right, so here's an example of full sun and little water. So you'll notice that yes, there are some cactus in the picture, but they also worked some native plants in there. And so it all works together. It has interest. They worked some of their palms into the background, but you also have color. So it's possible to have color without having to sacrifice plants. Now, do you have to have cacti and succulent in it? No, you do not. You can choose to do a totally cacti-free garden. Now, I would never probably choose to go with no succulents, because we have lots of succulents that do really, really well in our area. But if you don't want the pricklies, if you don't want things that have the spines or the thorns, you can choose to go with things that are going to be like grandkid or pet friendly, and you can still conserve water and do a really good job. Hydrozoning or microclimates. Most larger gardens have what we call microclimates. They have areas that tend to get hotter or tend to get colder depending upon what is going on. They have areas where they have less wind. So consider those areas whenever you're planting. You need to think about your primary zone. It's usually your area that contains turf and gets the most use. It also requires the most water. Your secondary zones are going to be those that contain your beds, and they are usually going to have your most visual appeal, but they're going to use a moderate amount of water. And then your minimal zones are your rarely assessed areas of property, and they survive usually with little care or little water. Shade gardening. We do have shady areas in South Texas in the coastal bend, so we do have plants on the Xeriscape plant list for shade areas as well. You'll notice in the picture above, we've got a variegated ginger. It works well in shady areas, but it also works well in areas that get morning sun. Ginger is a tough plant. It's difficult to kill. There is also a green version of it. There's quite a few different varieties of ginger. But you have other plants that work really well in the shade as well. So again, wander around your neighborhood, take a look at what's working in shady areas there, and you'll have, you'll do a lot better than me sitting and telling you, get this plant and get this plant and get this plant. You'll be able to make a well-informed decision based off of the plants that your neighbors and the businesses in your area are planting. Shady areas are generally a good place for outdoor living. Most of us, whenever we're putting our outdoor picnic areas or our outdoor relaxation areas, we place our tables and our chairs and stuff in shady areas. Most people don't like to plop out in the sun. So, and with that said, that means that most of the time you're trying to plan your shady areas where they're attractive. So there are lots of blooming plants, and there's lots of different textures and lots of different visual interests that you can use to make those areas aesthetically pleasing. It's always important to find the right plant for the right place. In this case, you have an enormous agave. This is in the Xeriscape garden, and it is a Waterwise plant, but it's huge. So even though he might be teeny tiny whenever you plant him, this is a great example of looking at the tag and learning about the mature size. This guy spreads probably close to 10 feet across whenever it's full grown and mature, even though it may have come from only a 4-inch pot when it was planted. The same thing with the prickly pear or the opuntia in the picture. It starts off small, but it will spread and cover a very large area. So keep that in mind. Xeriscape offers many different choices. In the pictures, you have some great pictures from the Xeriscape garden. This is actually a lantana. Then you have rain lilies. You have potato vine, works great down at the Xeriscape garden. And these plants all survive on less than an inch of rain per week. So we have the irrigation system set to make sure that we practice what we preach and that everything is working really well. Then you have shrimp plant. I believe that's shrimp plant. And then you have a cereus. So those are all great examples. So you can notice that none of these are cactus. We do have a succulent here, but you don't have to have prickly, pokey things in the garden to make it aesthetically pleasing. And one of the things that we have noticed is that a lot of people, when you talk about Waterwise landscapes or Xeriscapes, is that they immediately comes to mind that they have to have cacti and big rocks everywhere. And that is totally not true. In fact, you don't have to put any rocks into a Xeriscape garden at all. If you're one of those people that loves a lush green garden, you can find Xeriscape plants that work for that without any problem. You'll notice in this picture that they've really picked some good shapes and textures, and that you have lots of color, and these are all Xeriscape plants. Here you have a sage. I believe it's a Victorian salvia. And then you have Mexican honeysuckle. And then you have another agave there in the background. So those are great. Create practical turf areas with appropriate grasses. In South Texas, we really only have just a few grass choices. So if you're talking about sunny areas, you can either use Bermuda grass or you can use St. Augustine. There are a few people that have zoysia lawns and do fairly well with them. For Bermuda grass, we usually recommend Celebration. And for St. Augustine grass, we usually recommend Tam, floor Tam. So those are both great. Now, there are some advantages and disadvantages. So one of the advantages to Bermuda grass is that it tolerates high traffic areas. One of the disadvantages is that it will not do well in shady areas. So it also uses the most amount of fertilizer in our area. So just keep that in mind. You avoid high water varieties, choose a variety that fits your family's needs. So if you have the kids or the grandkids running around a lot, St. Augustine may not be a great choice for that. One of the advantages to St. Augustine is that it does do well in partial shade. Now, there's no turf grass that does well in dark shade. So, and then you can consider pavers or ground covers instead of turf grasses if you want to eliminate or reduce the amount of turf grass that you have. So here is an example at the Xeriscape garden of how we've limited the turf grass. We've used beds around the edges, and then we've placed just a small turf grass area in the center. And here they've actually put the beds around the edges, and they have just a really small turf grass area. Plus, one of the things I like about a limited turf grass area is that it's less mowing. If you're not someone who likes to get out there and mow, and this is the time of year where it has to be mowed at least once a week, then reducing the amount of turf grass gets you out there and gets the mowing done and gets you back inside where it's cool really quickly. So again, like I said, there's just two choices, Bermuda, St. Augustine, and then we do have a few zoysia lawns around as well. So here's Bermuda. Here are the advantages. There's lots of different varieties. It's multi-use. It can be used for golf courses, playgrounds. It's very drought resistant. It's inexpensive to put in a Bermuda grass lawn. It can either be sodded or it can be put in by seed. And it generally tolerates high traffic. And then again, I said that we recommend the Celebration. Disadvantages, it can be invasive. So if you've ever had Bermuda grass get into your flower beds, it is tough to get it out. So I don't generally recommend planting it next to areas where you're worried about it invading the spaces where you've got other plants. It's either that or you have to stay on top of it and make sure that you keep it cut back and cut out of those areas on a regular basis. It does not tolerate shade well. In cold areas, it goes dormant easily. We don't see that too often here in South Texas, in the coastal bend. The hybrids must be sodded, and it does use the most nitrogen out of any grass that we have in our area. Here's the general recommendations for mowing. You mow it about 1 to 2 inches tall. And then it's going to require a pound to pound and a half of fertilizer per 1,000 square feet. How are you going to know whether you need to fertilize or not? You're going to base that off of your soil test results. I get away with only fertilizing about once or twice a season here in the coastal bend because our soils are already fertile. But your soil test will give you those results to know whether you actually need to fertilize or not. Keep in mind, in the coastal bend, we have fungus that sits in the soil year round, and excess nitrogen, if we have one of those high rainfall events and that fungus takes off, excess nitrogen will usually make the infection much, much worse. So only providing the amount of nitrogen that it needs is generally a better thing, and it keeps the grass healthier. And then it's also important to learn how to water your grass. Generally, an inch of rainfall or the equivalent of an inch of rain per week is a good idea. You can figure out how your sprinkler system or your sprinklers provides that moisture by either putting out what we call catch cans, or you can put out some small cups or some tuna fish cans, and you run your irrigation system or your sprinkler until you have accumulated about an inch of water in the bottom. Unfortunately, on clay soils, that generally leads to high runoff very easily. We can usually only run our sprinklers about 15 minutes here before we start to have rainfall, before we start to have runoff into the street. And that's a big no-no in all of our cities. So we generally recommend what we call cycle soaking. That means you run your sprinkler system until you have runoff, and then you move it to the next area. And then when you're done with the entire thing, then you come back to the first area where you had the sprinkler and you run it for an additional 15 to 20 minutes. And what that does is it makes the water soak down deeper into the soil. And our goal is to try to get the water down at least 8 to 10 inches into the soil, because we want our root systems to be down lower so that when we do have drought, they are tougher and they're able to withstand those droughty periods much better. And then occasionally here, we may need to dethatch. Dethatch actually refers to this area up close to where the grass is growing. And if you have excess dead material that collects in here, it can actually form a mat that limits the amount of moisture that works its way down to the soil. So you may want to dethatch. Just quickly, let me go over St. Augustine. There are lots of different varieties of St. Augustine as well. St. Augustine is a great choice where you have salt spray because it's salt tolerant. It's also shade tolerant. Generally, it has to be sodded or sprigged because the hybrid varieties do not produce seed. And it's adaptable to most soils, and it is way less invasive than Bermuda. So St. Augustine is much easier to pull out of flower beds and stuff than what Bermuda grass is. A few of the disadvantages are that it is not as drought tolerant as Bermuda grass is, and it will put up with some foot traffic, but it's not as tolerable of foot traffic as what Bermuda is. And then it is prone to St. Augustine decline, chinch bugs, and fungal diseases. It doesn't mean that Bermuda grass is perfect. It can have some problems as well and can get fungal infections as well. Taking care of St. Augustine, you generally are going to mow at a much taller height of 3 to 4 inches. So I generally set my lawnmower on the high setting and just prepare myself to have to mow a little bit more often. And that's because St. Augustine is a much larger bladed grass, and so you can't cut it as short, or else you remove the growing tips off of the grass and you set yourself up for problems. It uses less fertilizer than what Bermuda grass does, so you usually have to put out fertilizer at a rate of about 1 pound per 1,000 square feet. And again, I get away with only having to fertilize once or twice during the growing season. And again, watered about 1 inch per week. And it too can develop a thatch layer if you're not careful. Just a quick look at what a grass plant looks like. Most grasses have rhizomes that travel along the soil. And then you have stolons, which are above the soil. So if it's above the soil, it's a stolon. If it's below the soil, it's a rhizome. You have your secondary shoots. You have what are called your blades. And then these are called tillers. So, and then the whole thing is called the crown. So that's how grass is generally grown. The keys to keeping lawns healthy, of course, is learning how to water. Make sure that you have a rain sensor on your sprinkler system so that if we are in the middle of a rainfall period, that your sprinkler system doesn't come on and run. It's irritating to drive through an area when it's pouring down rain and see sprinkler systems running. It's also a waste of water. And then it's better to water deeply but less frequently. It's better in the coastal bend to water your lawn one really good time per week instead of a little bit every day. So if you can water it one really good time per week, but make sure that the water is getting down to that 8 to 12 inch zone, then you're going to have better luck with your lawn than you will if you water it a little bit every day. And then again, test your soil so that you know what your fertility level is, and more fertilizer is definitely not better. And then always be on the watch for insects and diseases. So. All right, do we have any questions at this point?
None on Facebook.
All right. So some good reasons to test your soil: to find out what your nutrient levels are, to find out what your soil pH level is. We are generally always above 7.5 here. And then it helps protect your environment because putting out excessive fertilizers is not a good thing for the environment. It helps you to save money. I describe it to people like this. A good bag of fertilizer generally costs pretty close to $20. And if your lawn does not need that fertilizer, if your landscape does not need that fertilizer, would you go out there and throw $20 bills onto the lawn and then mow them up? So that's probably not a good thing. And then keeping the lawn healthy, keeping the landscape healthy, it helps promote a healthier environment for you and your family and your pets. Soil testing form looks like. So when you email me, I can send that out to you. Soil tests go all the way from simple test, just a routine analysis, all the way up to finding out what your micronutrients are. They can give you an idea of what your organic matter level is, what your salinity level is, and they will even texture your soil for you. So these prices change depending upon the cost at the soil testing lab. I believe a basic sample is now up to $14. So, but email me and I'll be more than happy to get those for you. So pavers, ground covers, and shrubs. This is actually from the Xeriscape garden. You'll notice that they've used a ground cover underneath shrubs, and this works very well. It is a slope. It helps maintain and hold things into place. These are all Xeriscape plants. I believe you have a crepe myrtle here. I think that's Asiatic jasmine, and I don't remember what those are. Here is a great example of using pavers and some ornamental grasses along with some shrubs to create a Xeriscape area. Here they used a large paver area and used that area with some pots to create an outdoor sitting area. If you're a fan of rock, you can always rock in those turf areas instead of choosing to put the turf down. Then you would have a no-mow area. Here they've used some great plants as well. They've got some lantana here. I believe I see one of the salvias poking out from behind there. You have opuntia, you have an ornamental grass here, and you have purple fountain grass there with some larger trees in the background. So watering efficiently. Like we said before, try to group plants together that receive a similar amount of moisture. So putting plants together that like water is a great idea. Putting plants together that only get watered occasionally is a good idea. Choose an irrigation method that works best for plants in the area. Generally, we recommend a drip irrigation system. They do make nozzles for sprinkler systems that distribute the water in a efficient manner also. So check with your sprinkler system suppliers and find out what you can do to replace those spray nozzles with some bubbler heads, or with some, they make some that actually fit on there that are drip irrigation hookups, and you can actually run them from those pop-ups or from those above ground sprinkler heads, and they allow you to put in drip to your plants. Once the plants are established, it's better to water infrequently, but again, water deeply, just what we were doing for our lawns. Deliver that water deeply so that your roots will go down deeper. Deeper roots mean that you'll have healthier plants. The best time to water is generally early morning. between 4 and 6 a.m. We understand that when we go into water restrictions, that you're assigned a watering time, and there's nothing that you can do about that except water at your given time. But when we're out of water restrictions, it's better to water early in the morning. And the reason for that is that it allows the rest of the day for the leaves to dry off if you've got water on the leaves. The worst time to water is late in the evening, and that's because the water sets on the leaves all night long, and it gives things such as funguses the opportunity to begin to take hold, and you can have a fungal outbreak if you have too much moisture in the middle of the night. So check your system and equipment frequently, make sure it's working. It's a good idea at least once or twice a year to run your sprinkler systems a zone at a time, and make sure that all of your heads are working, make sure that all the equipment is working properly, and then make sure that your sprinkler system control is working as well. And then rain sensors are always a great investment. Mulches are a terrific idea. You can apply 2 to 4 inches of mulch to any landscape. Of course, you would not want to put it over rock. Rock's considered to be a form of mulching. You can use organic or inorganic mulches. I heard the question on another presentation the other day, what is the best mulch? Well, the answer to that is something that is inexpensive and is available to you is generally the best mulch. A lot of it has to do with your personal preferences. Some people like the traditional mulches, and some people aren't afraid to try new and creative things. I remember at one point they actually had the shells from cocoa beans, and they would put those out at mulch, and when you watered your landscape, it smelled like hot chocolate. So that was really cool. I haven't seen those available in a while, and you maybe don't see those available down here because that mulch is really light, and the wind would probably blow it away. So there are lots of different mulches, so there is no mulch that is a wrong mulch. Mulching with anything is better than mulching with nothing. Mulches have a tendency to slow the water loss out of the soil. They create a barrier between the soil and the atmosphere, and they help to keep the moisture in. They minimize evaporation. They help protect the root system and the plants. A precaution, generally you want to keep the mulch at least a good ½ inch to inch away from plant stems, because if mulches retard the growth of weeds, they also will retard the growth of your plants that you have them pushed up against. Mulches also generally decay as the year goes on, and they work organic matter into the soil. So mulches are a great idea. They can also help keep they can help keep soils cool whenever we're in the heat of the summer. So they help that way. There is free mulch available at most city landfills. Every city has a different mulching program, so you need to check with your local city and see if they have mulches that are available. Some of the complaints I hear about city mulches are that it's full of trash, and that can be true sometimes, but free is free. I don't mind using the free mulch. I just go through and pull the trash out, so that's not a problem for me. And then finally, mulches increase the beneficial biological activity in the soil. Some people choose to put a weed barrier underneath the mulch. I don't mind pulling the weeds out, so I generally don't put a weed barrier down, especially if I like to dig down the soil and plant new plants. Mulch adds to the look of your landscape and prevents erosion, reduces weeds, and helps to save water. This is decomposed or granite. And this again is in the Xeriscape garden. You'll notice that we have ferns, we have some daylilies, we have agaves. I think that is a cenizo. I think that we have a Texas mountain laurel in this area also. So those are great choices. Okay, any questions?
Yes, we have one from Facebook. She says, I'm on Mustang Island close to the beach. It's very windy and sandy. Should I amend the soil when planting?
She can do no wrong by adding organic matter. So if she has compost available to her, it's always a great choice. But she can also use commercial compost or any organic matter such as peat moss to add to that. You're never going to probably put too much compost or organic matter if it's composted and coming from a natural source. With that said, it can be a lot of work to incorporate organic matter. So I usually recommend just add 2 to 3 inches or of organic matter several times a year, or every time that you change up plants, add in some new organic matter. And then, like we were just talking about, the compost will also break down, the mulch will also break down as it's decomposing and will help add organic matter as well. So yes, compost or organic matter is a great choice for adding to that soil.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Appropriate maintenance, maintaining your garden. You always need to use good horticultural practices to maintain your garden. And it's generally a great idea to at least walk through your garden at least 2 to 3 times a week to see what's going on, to monitor for insect or diseases, but also to watch for those weeds so that something doesn't get out of control. We've all had a bed that got inundated with Bermuda grass, and it is not fun to get those weeds out of there when we've let it go too far. Mow your lawns at the appropriate level. Fertilize as needed, not when your neighbors tell you to. One of the things I tell people is beware of these companies that want to put you on a regular fertilizer program. If you're going to go with one of them, insist that they base their fertilizing off of a soil test and off of what it says that you need, not off of what they say that you need. And then always pull the weeds and try to get rid of them. It's better to get rid of weeds before they go to seed, because once they go to seed, they've spread and you'll have more weeds to pull up. They also compete for nutrients and for moisture in the soil. And then maintain your irrigation systems and prune shrubs and trees as needed. Just quickly, pruning shrubs and trees down here, you can, if you're just doing maintenance pruning, you can pretty much prune whenever you need to. If you're doing major pruning, all of your hardwood trees and shrubs are generally pruned in late winter here. If you're doing pruning of palm trees, that's generally done during the spring or the early summer. So palms are actually behave much like a large grass as opposed to a tree. They're really not trees, but the pruning and the planting of palm trees totally occurs at a different time of the year than what your traditional hardwood trees does. And then the Xeriscape Learning Center and Design Center garden, again, is downtown next to the Museum of Science and History. If you've never been there, take a few minutes, go down there and take a look. We even incorporated some old concrete pieces from an area that was being dug up and torn down. So it's actually a very nice garden. Take a chance and go down there and see what it's got to offer. There are always things that you can't control. This is a picture after Hurricane Harvey of the Xeriscape garden. We had significant damage down there. You can't control weather. There's nothing that you can do about it. Sometimes you can't control animals. We've all had animals that have done crazy things, both in our houses and in our gardens. And sometimes you can't control people. I've lived next to neighbors before who didn't have the same concepts and ideas about what their yard should look like versus what I thought my yard should look like. We've all had trees that have come across our fences that just drove us crazy, and we tried to talk to our neighbors and cooperate with them. Most of the time, your neighbors are fairly cooperative, but occasionally we get people that are not. We've also had people that live in our own household who don't understand basic pruning concepts and have gone out and done things that we really got aggravated about with them. So feel free to educate your family, feel free to educate your neighbors. if you feel like they're open to that, and come up with some kind of plan to control your animals. If you know you have a destructive dog, if you know you have a cat that's out of control, then you may want to plan some fenced off areas where you can get your dog out there without him having full access to the garden. Here's more damage after the hurricane. We had huge limbs off of the pecan tree. We had mesquite trees that were down. It was quite a mess after Hurricane Harvey. But it's back to looking really good now. Drought impact on Texas surface water. We always see the drought updates on our local news. Our runoff areas that impact our area all come from up in the San Antonio and over to the Uvalde area. So we have two areas where we have our watershed. One of those, the Nueces River watershed, which comes down from about the Three Rivers area and works its way over towards here. And then we have the Choke Canyon area. So those both feed into our area. And then we also have the Mary Roads pipeline, which pipes in water from up in this area. Some simple steps to a Waterwise garden. Step one, make a wish list. What is it that you want? What would you like to see? Take an inventory of your area, come up with a plan for how you're going to accomplish that, and then begin to install your Xeriscape over a period of months or years, and then maintain and enjoy it. Every drop of water counts. Don't waste water. Okay, do we have any more questions?
No questions over here.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm just about at the end of the presentation. I think I held within the 30-minute time frame pretty well. Again, I want to remind you about our landscape web series. Coming up next is palm maintenance for coastal landscapes. That's with Ginger Easton Smith from Aransas County. She's the county extension agent there, and she is very knowledgeable about palms and always does a terrific job presenting on them. The week after that, we have turf grass maintenance in coastal landscapes. That's Michael Potter. He's the county extension horticulturist for Conroe. I'm trying to think what county that is, but then we have Dr. Kimberly Cochran coming up after that. So make sure that you tell these folks how much you appreciate them. They take the time out of their day to come in. Well, right now it's virtual, but they're taking the time to do some terrific presentations for you. Bill Green from Texas A&M Forest Service did a great job last week, and was a very knowledgeable program on tree care. So feel free in the chat to always make sure that those folks feel welcome and appreciated. And again, thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions, you can always shoot me an email. My email is kevin.gibbs@ag.tamu.edu. And again, I'm the county extension horticulturist for Nueces County. I'm eager to get back to the point where we can come and start doing things in person. But right now, it's been a joy and a pleasure to visit with you virtually and deliver this program today. If you have further questions, feel free to email them to me, and I'll respond as quickly as I can. Thank you, and I'm turn it back over to you, Ray.
Well, I don't really have any more to say, so thank you everyone for listening, and see you next month.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kevin. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, Bill.